Hello, everyone. In prepping for the podcast this week, I decided to take a look at some of the current trends going on. And a couple of them are fascinating. So the first one is authenticity and imperfection. In other words, not making a polished photograph. And it goes along with the other trend, which is, from my opinion, is storytelling. So storytelling is becoming big, and storytelling is never perfect. Nobody's story is perfect. It's just there. And all of this comes down to a lot of what I've been telling you guys about event photography, right? If you look at a reenactment type of event versus a wedding, right? A reenactment is constant motion. I'll give you an example from the fort. So during some of the battles at the fort last year, we had a roped off area, right? So we couldn't get up close and personal to the guns going off for obvious reasons. But you've got a battle running through the woods. Rapidly through the woods. You got people on horseback, you've got people attacking, people falling, and the attackers coming forward. That moves further down the road. All right? Now you're in a bigger field. You got the same battle going on. You just move from one place to another, but you're moving. You're not doing, to counterpoint this, wedding photography, where you get everybody together, and you post them, and you take a picture. This is not to denigrate wedding photography or any other fixed event photography. This is just to do a contrast between the two with what we're talking about today, which is storytelling and authenticity. What you're trying to capture is a moment. With a fixed photograph, you're trying to capture people at their best. With an event like a reenactment, you're just trying to capture the action. It's never going to be you sitting in one place unless you know what the action's going to be, and being able to get that 1/3 set up in there and get the lighting just right, get your angle just right. No, it's movement. It is imperfection. It is life. When I take portraits, I, be honest, hate posed portraiture. The reason I have this passion for real photographs is if somebody's laughing, if they're smiling, you can tell if they're smiling because they're taking a photograph or they're smiling because it's genuine. And every time I take a photograph, I don't want to capture a fake event, right? I want to capture reality. For example, several years ago, the company I worked for would have these events. Now I work for several companies that had like Christmas type events, right? And you just go to the event. But this one, I wanted it to be a little different. They were actually having a new venue. It was a restaurant that was being set up in an old bank, believe it or not, which had the vault still in place. So as people came in, I wanted to take pictures of everybody. My goal here was twofold. I had a computer all set up, and we had a projector, so I could take those photographs that I was taking, transfer them to the computer, and have it run as a slideshow while people were out on the dance floor. And the people who didn't want to dance could see the photographs of the people who came in. And I would have people, and they would just, you'd have the vice president and his wife, and they're sitting very prim and next to each other. And I would just look at them, I go, would you at least act like you like each other? And they would both freeze and just stare at me. And I got a real moment. Then they would laugh. and I got another real moment. Or they would change their pose and it would become relaxed now. It wouldn't be this stiff pose of two people sitting here getting their picture taken. To me, that's always been the real power in photography, is not capturing a fixed event, but capturing the reality of the event, right? It's one thing to take a picture of the wedding party all standing there nice and prim and proper with the bride and groom in the middle. And it's quite another to take a photograph of that head table with everybody joking and having a good time together. To me, that's the photograph I want. The other one's great. All right, it's a capturing of all the people who were there. But the other is life. It is the true reality of why they're there. They're there to celebrate the wedding, not to pose like they're going to be stuck in little figurines on top of a cake. They're there to enjoy themselves. They're there to enjoy the couple. And that's what you want, right? So I find it interesting that the trend is now toward authenticity and imperfection. And again, if you're taking photographs of people sitting at the head table, all right, and they're having a good time, you're telling a story. You don't tell a story by having people posed. I had a couple, I was doing a free photograph session. And they were there and they did some posing. And then they decided to start having a snowball fight. And I captured the snowball fight. Now, the photograph that I put together was them as a couple looking happy together and not the snowball fight. But I think I treasured the snowball fight pictures more than anything else. But again, this is what's happening now. This is what people want to see now. Well, to me, it's what we always should have been doing. Capturing moments, not posing moments. And I understand that there's an entire art to directing people. Been there, done that. I've also done the other side. We had a photo. There was a American photo magazine, and they had a photo shoot where you paid, and they gave you a series of models. So the models were professionals. They knew what they were doing. They did the standard model, okay, move, freeze, move, freeze, move, freeze. So they hit a pose, then they moved to the next pose, and they moved to the next pose. And if you knew what you were watching for the model, you knew when to take those pictures to get those posed shots, right? And the one thing I noticed while I was there was a mix of men and women models, but there seemed to be a predominance, almost an overwhelming predominance of male photographers. As a matter of fact, I wasn't paying that much attention to the photographers, but I think they were almost all men. There might have been a woman or two in there, and that was about it. And they would flock to the women. I was there to take photographs. I didn't care who I was getting. It was early in my career. I wanted to get, mid part of my career, I was starting things over again. And I wanted to get used to taking photographs of models. What they do, what the mechanism that they go through. And I could go over and take a picture of one of the guys because there was nobody there. I had full ability to do whatever I wanted to because I had nobody around me. I could move anywhere I wanted. If you looked over at the other spots, you had a woman standing there and you had these people packed next to each other trying to take a picture of them. Well, okay. But I could go joke with the guys. And then some of the other photographers would notice I was there joking with this guy and taking his picture, and they'd come over because there was more room. And we kept moving around like that. And I always I'd look at the models, and their days were long, right? We were there for like 8 hours. So it was a long day. They were getting a little tired. But God, would they laugh if you got them going. And once you did, you got the best pictures ever. And going back to them later on, they remembered you. And you'd get the eye contact that you were looking for from a photograph. So from that, I got a plethora of photographs, both of just being present and watching them do their thing, or watching them laugh, or watching them interact with somebody, as well as the posed ones, although they weren't really posed the same way they were before. Because once you get, I think once a model gets past the, I have to do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and you break up that routine, it changes the entire session. And I think that goes for anybody. If you can get them out of whatever it is that they're in, that mind space, that head space that they're in, and you can break that up, you can get more natural photography out of people. I remember taking pictures of reenactors. And we're standing there very stoically. And I'm like, you can smile. It won't break your face. It'll work. You can do it. And I found out afterwards that they were actually instructed not to. And I said to him, okay, well, you smiled. And if you don't tell anybody, I won't. So we're good. But it broke up what they were doing. And I understand what the goal was by having them not smile. And they went back to their normal attitude afterwards. But I'm sorry. I don't think that people were stoic during the war. I think that they needed to find humor, that they needed to find a release of some kind to keep from going crazy. And especially during wartime, when you had the families there, no, I'm sorry. I can't imagine a soldier coming back from patrol and finding his wife and child waiting for them, that they wouldn't smile. They might be tired, but they're going to smile. Now, the other big trend, which, they say it's trending this year. I'm sorry. It's been around for a couple of years now, and that's using film photography. Now, I don't have anything against film photography except the waste. Now, let me explain that. So, if you're a digital photographer, and I'll go to the fort and I'll shoot 300 photographs, all right? I can throw most of those away, and what have I cost? The use of the battery, and maybe wear and tear on my drive, the SD cards that are in there. That's it. If I were to shoot 300 photographs, and bear in mind, I usually keep about 10%. All right, so keep that number in mind. So let's say I do 300 photographs. We'll say 360. So I shoot 360 photographs, and I keep 10%, so I keep 36 of them. Okay. If I were to shoot film, and I could get a 36 exposure roll, that's 10 rolls of film. That's 10 metal containers, 10 plastic spools, 10 metal caps top and bottom, because that's how the film containers are put together, not to mention the film itself. Okay. If I keep 10% of those, right, so I'm keeping basically one spool out of that, I just wasted 9 rolls of film. And I still have the waste of the 10 containers, the 10 spools, the 10 caps. Well, 20 if you consider top and bottom. And obviously, the photographs are not going to be on one, so they're going to be scattered across it. And they all have to be printed then to make sure you could find the ones that you want. Printed in some way. Now, you can get away with what were called negative prints. It's basically like an index. I think a lot of the photo labs call them that now. An index print, which is just a small version of every picture. It might be too small for you to actually see the details to know if you want to keep it or not. But we used to do index prints. And the index prints that we did were basically you put the negative directly on the paper and flash the light through it so that you used one piece of paper for a set of negatives, and then you could go through there to see what you wanted to print. It cuts down on the waste because every time you take a photograph, there's processes that you have to go through, right? Black and white was what I used the most when it came to doing my own processing for film. And you have to start off with developer. Developer is basically what takes that image that's on the film that you can't see and makes it visible. And it's basically putting like silver onto the film itself. Now, if you leave it in developer too long, it'll match to everything and you end up with a black negative. So after you take it out of developer, you have to put it in stop bath. Stop bath says, okay, we're done. No more of this is going to darken. Then you got to put it in fixer. That's going to hold everything in place. Then it's got to be rinsed, and then it's got to be put up. Well, I've got 3 toxic chemicals that I just had to put that through. And that's black and white. Color's different. I think color is 5 different chemicals that you have to put things through. That's not counting the process of getting the film out and things like that. I'm dumping a lot of the manual process out of this thing. I'm just trying to keep down to what the waste would be. So then you print them. And if you like, you did the index print to know which ones you wanted. And let's say you were 100% on there. You got just what you wanted. You could see them. And you just print those. Now you've wasted nothing. But let's say you went to a photo lab and you just dropped off your film. All right. I drop off 10 rolls of film, 36 exposures each. I'm going to get 360 photographs printed. All the chemical processing that had happened for that. Now, it depends on how they do it. A lot of the printers are now ink, so that cuts down quite a bit. You're not using quite the same number of chemicals. And again, when we were using developer, stop bath, and fixer, you ended up with those chemicals left over at the end. They weren't evaporating. If you're using ink, the ink's being printed. Only what it needs is being printed on the paper. You're not wasting a bunch of ink. So we'll take that. We'll say that the lab that does the processing is more efficient on using the chemicals, but you still got chemical waste. And they're using ink printers so that there's no chemicals there. But you still got the chemical waste from the printing from making the negative into a viewable object. Now from there, if you've got your prints done yourself, you did the index print and you used them, you got the waste chemicals and you got no waste. But here I've got 360 photographs. I don't need all of them. I'm not going to keep them all. I'm going to throw away 30, all but 36. Well, I have 360. That's over 300 photographs that I had printed that are now waste. It's wasted paper, it's wasted ink, it's wasted time and resources on the machine that printed them out. So while I appreciate analog photography, and I know some people say, well, you can get the same effect with a preset in Lightroom. You can, but I get the whole mystique behind analog photography. I'm just not a fan of it because I used to have to shoot that way. For me, it's not a novelty. When I shot a wedding and I went through, I think I went through 20 rolls of film and then had to go through and get the pictures out that I wanted. And I ended up with about 50, I think, out of all the shots that I took. I think they were 24 exposure rolls. So I ended up with about 480 photographs and ended up again, well, about 10%, 50 of them, for a wedding that I was shooting. A lot of the crowd for that one. But looking at it that way, you've got a lot of waste in analog. And that's why I'm not a fan of it. I get the whole, you don't know what your photograph looks like. You know what? You can do the same thing with a digital camera. Just don't look at the damn things until you get home. But, and here's the big but, these things won't happen again necessarily. You've got one chance to capture them. And if it's an event that's going on and you can go through your photographs real quick like you can with a digital camera, you can make corrections, or you can say, damn it, I didn't get this guy the way I wanted him to. I want to go back and shoot him again. So it gives you a huge advantage. And again, less waste. And you see the pictures more quickly. But again, you get to correct your mistake. As opposed to with analog, you just have to learn from them. Now, that's not to say you're not going to learn doing digital. Of course you are. But when you shoot all those photographs, right, and I come home and I take my SD card and put it in, and I can see what I've got, I can see all my photographs, and at this point I've spent no money, no new money, because I got the camera, I got the SD cards. If I were shooting analog, there's the price of the film to begin with. Then there's the price of processing it. And then there's the price of printing it. Now, some places will give you the small print for free for each one. But if you really want to keep a good print, like an 8x10, you got to go back and pay for it. So, from a professional viewpoint, I am not nostalgic for the Kodachrome color that Simon and Garfunkel loved to sing about. I am not nostalgic about the tactile process of holding a negative in my hand, because I've got them all over the flipping house at this point. I try to put them in envelopes and folders, and I always seem to find another one kicking around somewhere. And I end up most of the time just making it digitally I had to make digital copies of all my negatives so that I had backup copies of everything in case they get destroyed. So as a fun thing to do, I get analog film. As a professional thing to do, I absolutely do not. Because again, if you wanted to capture a particular mood for a photograph, you can do that with all kinds of presets, and you don't have to stick to Kodachrome color. You can color grade things so that you're adding a little more blue to it or a little more yellow to it. If you're going cinematic, you make the shadows more blue and you make the flesh more yellow, and you're there. You've made a cinematic print if that's what you're looking for. If you want to warm up a family photograph, you're adding more oranges and yellows into it to bring it and make it look warm and living and lived. And then there's the editing. Now, for me, there's certain retouches that I do, but I don't do them all the time. And it just depends on what I'm doing. If I'm shooting a bodybuilder, I'm going to take the time to make those muscles pop, to give them 3 dimensions. If I'm shooting a person, I will add 3-dimensional space to them. If I'm shooting an event, I'm not going to take the time because I will be there for hours trying to get everything done the way I want it to. There are AI tools that will help with some of that stuff. Eventually, they might get there where it will handle what I do, but it's not. And possibly never will be, but we'll see. Human vision and ones and zeros for a computer are very different. And so training it to get all the nuances that you would typically do as a photographer, and you can see the photograph and you can see the changes you're making, is quite different. But I think, personally, that I'm happy to see both the authenticity and the storytelling coming back into the forefront again as we go into this year. Again, not so crazy about the analog film. Some of the AI stuff I've used. As a matter of fact, I had one service that I used to use, which was great if you did fixed photographs. So if you shoot landscapes, for example, it'd be good. If you shoot architecture, if you shoot weddings, things like that, where you needed a large collection of your photographs to feed it finished photographs so it could learn what your style was. And then every time it took your photographs in, it fed them back to you, and then you made your corrections to it if there were any, and then you fed them back so that it could learn what it got wrong and change its interpretation of your style. Really kind of cool, but you had to have like 1,000 photographs to feed the thing correctly in the first place. So you have to have already had a body of work and know how to do editing before you could have that done for you. And of course, there's the analog. I understand. I loved analog when I was shooting it. I stayed on analog well into the digital age. But I have to be quite honest, now that I've got digital, there are some things that I miss about the analog photographs, but I would much rather shoot 400 photographs for an event and only keep 10% or less than I would to shoot that many on film. And honestly, I wouldn't. That's an awful lot of roll changes. And when you're changing rolls of film, you miss what's going on. And that, to me, is one of the biggest advantages of digital, is the fact that you're not, I can do 1,000 some odd photographs on the SD cards that I've got. So I'm not missing something because I'm taking the time to change out my film. And you have to be careful changing out your film. And I don't have to worry about running out of film. I don't have to worry about, do I want to take another picture here because I've got more of the day to go, and do I have enough film to do the day? And with digital, you do have the option of saying, well, I really wanted to get a good picture of this guy. Did I? Taking a look at it quickly on the back of your camera, zooming it in so you can see what you took, and saying yes or no. And well, okay, I'll just put on the list for later on. I will get a different shot from a different angle and try to get a better shot. So those are my opinions about the trends for this week. I know I went kind of long this week, but it's a good set of trends. And as you can tell, I have strong opinions about every one of them. But that said, thank you guys for listening, and I'll talk to you all next week.